Alright, I know that those of you who are close to me have probably been waiting for me to spill the tea on this story for a couple of months now, but I wasn't really in the headspace for it. I mean, it's still kind of surreal to me, and I might be listing some of these events out of sequence for the sake of topical clarity, so bear with me. I'd like to point out also that even though this guy might be a mild sociopath, I don't hate him. And if he's watching this, I hope he'll use this information as a way to make better life choices. And more to the point, I know that I'm largely responsible for a lot of what happened here, but let me just make one thing clear. I'm not a good person. I'm a neutral person. I have my own convictions as much as anyone else, but for the most part I tend to live my life in the gray. And as a result, I attract a lot of morally dubious characters and will often give them the chance that no one else does. I guess I conduct my relationships kind of like a proverbial Jesus. Well, even Jesus had Judas, and here's my story. Now, I wouldn't say I'm a popular artist by any stretch. Between DeviantArt, Facebook, and Instagram, I barely crack 100 unique followers, and I've been active on the internet for a good 15 years or so. I mean, even objective garbage like robot hugs is more lucrative than my work, and that kind of pisses me off. But you get the point, I'm pretty underground. And that's just organic reach. When it comes to people I've dated taking an active interest in my work, or even just close male friends, the interest ranges from non-existent to critically negative. So when this one guy took an active interest in my content, I was pretty much floored. We met on DeviantArt back in 2013 or so after he liked the concept behind one of my comics, but then he went through some drama and ended up deleting his account. He found me again through my personal comics webpage, and we ended up communicating through email until he got a Facebook. Now, to be fair, even though we had known each other for about 7 years before things went south, we were only really close for the last year or so of our friendship, with me having kind of rebounded onto him during a period of heartache, which I'll get more into later. I take full responsibility for that mistake. But for the longest time, the conversation wasn't that deep on my end, and since he's on the spectrum, it would take me forever to read and reply to his emails anyway. I don't mean to sound like a jerk in saying that, it's just that once I got out of high school, it became harder for me to process a wall of text without going over the same sentences over and over. And I'll be honest too, I generally prioritize people I low-key want to bang over others, but I think everyone is secretly like that and won't admit it. And since he was a self-identified asexual and 7 years my junior, he wasn't exactly on my radar, so we had more of a gay best friend dynamic. Talking about current issues, gossiping about the people in the community, stuff like that. And yeah, I did give him a pass on a lot of things because of his autism. A lot of people close to me are on the spectrum, so I'm used to it. Honestly, it runs rampant in this day and age anyway, especially on the internet where like-minded individuals congregate, so anytime some normie isn't blatantly aware that a person speaking to them is on the spectrum, I kinda judge them as being less than intelligent. Besides, I know what it's like to be the weird kid growing up, and now I'm the one befriending all these younger dudes who are going through things I myself went through. I'm like Wendy among the Lost Boys. For a time, I actually kinda liked it. I remember at some point he was telling me about his OCs and the stories he was working on, and the inspiration behind them, but I wasn't quite ready to be open with my own unfinished projects, as it's only within like the last year or two that I'm actually becoming less paranoid about copyright infringement and more comfortable sharing my work in progress. Now that I think about it, that's probably part of the reason I've been underground for so long. I remember he gave me detailed Word docs describing how to draw his characters if I wanted to try drawing them. But they were hard for me to follow because I'm one of those people who needs to see something done in order to process it. He did eventually start showing me sketches that were far more helpful to me. But the thing is, he kind of took for granted that I was willing to give drawing his characters a go. Actually, it's more like it went from, here's a guide if you ever want to try it, to asking me if I had finished drawing them every day until I crapped out a sketch when I hadn't even signed on to it. And keep in mind his OCs were anthro characters and I had very little experience drawing furries at the time. so it's not like I could turn out a drawing in a day. In one of our last ever conversations, he actually said something to the effect of, "I wouldn't expect too much of you, except for the occasional sketch." Like he somehow thought he was entitled to it. At least it never went past a couple of pencil sketches, because I sure as hell wasn't going to do more than that for free. Nevertheless, he was a pretty good conversationalist, and as time went on, I was able to confide more personal stuff with him. Unlike most guys at the time, he actually seemed interested enough in what I had to say that he would give unique feedback that showed he was listening. He also appreciated my uncanny ability to backtrace people on the internet using limited information, which at the time I was unabashedly proud of, but that came back to bite me in the ass. First, there was the incident. You see, apparently I met this one cosplayer, some guy called that he hit it off with at some anime convention in his area. The guy in question had a cosplay similar to one of his OCs or something, and I guess he wanted to know more about it, to give more background to his character. I forget all the details. Well, I managed to find some information about hoping that would suffice, but like an idiot, went and contacted the guy and creeped him out. I honestly didn't know would be that forward, but I made a mental note to be more careful about the information I gave my friend in the future. Well, obviously I didn't take my own advice, because a couple years later, I voluntarily dug up some dirt on a local con-goer who had put me blast in a cosplay Facebook group we were members of. This group will become important again later. And I won't relay what I found there, but boy is it juicy. I admit, I got a little high off of this important discovery and I was excited to show him. But then he started coming to me looking for every little bit of information on everyone who had ever had something to say about him being a weirdo or a creep or whatever for a supposed defamation lawsuit he was compiling. And at the time, I guess I humored him. Bear in mind, we were both living in California at the time, one of those snowflake states where it's easy to sue the pants off someone just for breathing if you have the dinero for it. Comes from a pretty affluent family, which I think is partially responsible for why he's out of touch with reality at times, but I'll get into that in a bit. So anyway, he kept crawling up my ass about finding dirt on these people, most of whom were degenerate in their own way, so it wasn't hard, even though I hadn't formally signed on to the sleuthing project. Eventually, I just kind of accepted it, since it made me feel useful. We posed as a fake person to gain access to the chat groups of the furries involved with the drama, trying to get blackmail and see what these people actually thought of them. Which wasn't that bad, since did most of the work, though I admit posing as a catfish on Skype to get some information out of one of the head furries involved in the drama was immensely stressful. And I weren't exactly on the same page half the time we posed as this fake person, and he isn't exactly a pro at getting in a character, so to speak. If it wasn't for me helping him, I'm pretty sure they would have seen through his facade. So now, about that period of heartache I mentioned earlier. Well, I got involved online with this one guy I met on Facebook through. He too was called out in the Facebook cosplay group, and I took a chance to decide to be his friend, but we quickly grew closer. I was lonely and dissatisfied with my second marriage. It was a rather dark time in my life, and the involvement only lasted about 8 months or so, but I was deeply destroyed when it ended, and there was no one I could turn to about it except for, you guessed it, I tried to stay pretty neutral about it, since I assumed that they were still friends, but once it got out that they weren't exactly on amicable terms, I stopped holding back. You know how it is, being a bitter ex and all. Sometimes you just need to talk smack. So I had said some things about the guy that weren't very nice. Things like, if you put a cosplay of Monica from DDLC on an electric fence, my ex would get shocked twice. Or, my ex has no right to be critical of the way women look when he himself looks like Jeffrey Dahmer after having eaten one too many teenage boys. And some darker stuff that I won't talk about because that's neither here nor there. I told him all these things in confidence, but he had no problem sharing them with people I didn't know, who didn't know me, and who I didn't particularly want to know about my business. I mean, I'm not going to deny that I talk smack, because I did. And I always keep in mind that anything I say in private can make its way to the public. So while I was annoyed, I wasn't outright angry at this point. I just made a mental note that can't keep his mouth shut, and to be careful about the information I give him in the future, because obviously I hadn't learned that lesson well enough from the incident. I also told a number of things about my current marriage and my dissatisfaction with it, as well as my first marriage and my minor annoyances with it. I half-jokingly mentioned that I thought my teenage stepdaughter was gay, but he ran with that when I told him that my ex-husband was a more traditional conservative and, well, you know what their stance on LGBT issues is. He was worried that if she was indeed some level of queer and her family was not accepting, that she might fall in with a more psychotic woke crowd, which, to be fair, is a pretty legitimate concern. I mean, it happened to me in my early 20s, but particularly one like the furries he was dealing with. Insisted I give him her personal cell number, which I would not do for a number of reasons. 1, I didn't have her number at the time. 2, I'm not going to hand over my 17-year-old stepdaughter's private phone number to some 24-year-old rando that my kids don't even know about, because I don't talk about my private life with my kids. Is that weird? 3, I would absolutely screw up my custody arrangement with the kids who are biologically mine if I did something stupid like that. I mean, granted, a lot of people from Northern California don't know how to mind their own damn business, so maybe this is a subcultural norm with Miles that is lost on me, who's a SoCal native, but seriously, dude, I thought autism was supposed to make you smarter. From then on, I just tried to avoid the subject as much as possible and redirect his attention to other, more pressing matters. Oh yeah, so remember how I mentioned that at some point in our correspondence, I let my guard down and started sharing stuff with him more? Well, I started working on this new graphic novel idea back in late 2018 that dealt with a lot of my feelings at that time in the abstract. I had a minor side character that was a composite of and another friend from Sacramento who I had met back in college, which I mentioned when he asked if anyone in the story was inspired by him, and thankfully he wasn't bothered by it, though he did kind of latch on to the idea of his character, and suggested giving said character more of a background, and I wasn't really bothered by it. I do think he was a little confused about the story I was trying to tell, though. See, my comic was a fictional amalgamation of things I had felt that I had twisted into something with a more Lynchian narrative, something vaguely supernatural. I think he was hoping it would be more of a call to action based on his secondhand accounts of the furry drama, and while I did have that in mind for a second part to my story, I don't think he fully understood the concept of imagination playing its part in my comic's development. Nevertheless, I showed him my scripts because it was nice to share my work with somebody and get intellectual feedback on it in real time, and because he seemed to enjoy them. Let me reiterate, it is rare for anyone, let alone a guy, to take an active interest in my mind like that. So to say this gave me a confidence boost is a vast understatement. And the fact that he had actually understood where I was coming from with my method of storytelling and symbolism I was trying to convey, it was almost too good to be true. And of course, when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. So over time, we discovered that we have an uncanny amount in common. I mean, we liked the same music, had similar socio-political views, etc. Yeah, it was rare to find someone who seemed to match my interests so well. And around November of 2019, I got it in his head that he and I had relationship potential, which, on a purely objective level, I could see the compatibility. But it was not a viable option because A, we both needed to get our respective lives in order, and B, that I was loyal to and deeply in love with the person I was involved with and did not see myself moving past them anytime soon. I said as much, and he agreed with my reasoning, and I thought that was that. Keep in mind, this guy is autistic and asexual, so when we had conversations like this, they were purely objective, coming from the outside looking in, so this wasn't supposed to be one of us coming on to the other or something you would expect from a couple of heterosexual normies. At least, that's how it always been in context, but in the weeks to come, he started being really weird about it. Once again, I did my best to redirect his attention on this, but it's like he became a completely different person. And keep in mind, I knew this guy for 7 years. I felt emotionally safe with this guy. He knew everything about my likes and dislikes, and then he went balls deep into butt-headedness, throwing everything he knew about me as a person out the window. First of all, he knew that grandiose displays of wealth on dates is an enormous turn-off for me. I have some darker issues from the past that feed into that, which is a story for another time, but there are other reasons I hate having a date spend large amounts of money on me too. I mean, I come from a low-income background and I don't want to be viewed as a gold digger. It's irresponsible coming from a potential life partner, creates unreasonable expectations for both parties, and most of all, I can't reciprocate that kind of generosity and I don't want to owe anybody anything. Yet here was wanting to take me on a date to an expensive seafood restaurant, offering to buy me the printer I had wanted to start up my comics publishing business. Then as it got closer to Christmas time, desperately trying to offer to buy me any little gift he possibly could. A camera, a teddy bear, all of which I explicitly refused, saying a Christmas card with a nice handwritten note inside would suffice. When my home life took a turn for the worse, he even suggested that me, him, and some chick he hasn't spoken to in over a decade, who I later found out was another one of his relationship potentials, rent out a house in Rancho Palos Verdes, an area about a half hour from my city that there is no way in hell I could ever afford on a budget of trying to get back on food stamps, and I explained as much to him. Like I said before, he's from a higher social class than me, so he's kind of out of touch with the type of life I'm accustomed to. Even still, I had other plans at the time, plans that involved me living with someone else, and I explained that to him in no uncertain terms. And that's when went from well-intentioned idiot to outright annoying pain in the ass. So not only did not drop the issue when I tried to circumvent it, or outright told him to knock it off, but he started to prove that even asexuals think with the lower half of their body sometimes. Maybe not in the physical sense, but there seems to be some kind of similar psychological response I've noticed that people with low or non-existent sex drives get when they become infatuated that makes them stop thinking about what's in the here and now and go a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. He started bringing up the non-issue of my first husband and our custody arrangement, which I had not had a problem with in over a decade and have no intention of messing with now. Yeah, my first husband is an idiot sometimes and we don't always see eye to eye on things, but we have been civil, if not amicable, for years. And all things considered, he's a good father to my kids, and my kids don't need another man to take on the role of stepfather, but kept insisting that he belonged in that role. And that's something I've noticed with a lot of these mental cell types. They don't factor the concept of love into relationships, but I do. They see that two people work well together and want some sort of socially beneficial business partnership, but I want energy and chemistry, and to be able to work past serious issues with my partner, and to be able to open up and love again, no matter how dark things become. And realistically, I don't think a celibate relationship would have worked in my favor. I'm 31 at the time of recording this, meaning I'm in my sexual prime, and I don't have those insecurities and hang-ups of a girl in her late teens or 20s, so I'd lose my mind after 6 months of not getting laid. Then he insisted that we have a discussion over video chat, I guess so I could hear his sincerity or something. Props to you if you got that reference. I was out of town visiting family at the time, but I told him I could FaceTime when I got back. But he kept treating it like a date, down to picking out a specific shirt to wear for the blessed event. Once again, I had to be overt with him, telling him to knock it off, but you can probably guess how well that worked out. And then came the icing on this 7-layer cake. I wrote a novel for National Novel Writing Month back in November 2016 and spent the next year editing it for self-publication on CreateSpace, which finally happened somewhere in the ballpark of February 2018. Apparently, I bought an ebook copy and read it, but I didn't know about this until a few days before I cut contact with him. When out of the blue he suggested that I reread my own published work and take note of the parallels between one of the main characters and the ex of mine that was his former friend, a person that I didn't even meet on Facebook until 2 months after the book was published. Instead of reading through my work and commenting on the nuances or the themes, or offering critique or feedback, he basically tells me in so many words that I should use my own written work as a means of saving me from myself. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but at that point I was so sick of his crap that he could have told me that the sky was blue and I still would have wanted to suffocate him with a pillow in response. But yeah, after that I figured he had more or less been playing a long con all these years, ticking off my boxes like I was a character in a dating sim until I was close enough to jump on with a burlap sack. But he fundamentally misjudged how close we actually were. After that, I went to straight up ignoring him, but he didn't try to message me either. So I figured that maybe some personal space is in order and then things would be copacetic. A day goes by with nothing, but then the next morning, my husband messages me from work with a screenshot of some anime convention pic from Instagram. There was a couple in the background circled on it, and apparently somebody randomly sent him that pic and tried to convince him that it was me cheating on him. I immediately assumed it was me. After all, I had been helping him do shady stuff like this for the past couple of years, and demanded to know who my assailant was. After some running around, he gave up the profile of some random girl who I didn't know from Eve, and messaged her. After talking to her, I felt kind of bad for her. She had more or less been tricked into thinking she was doing the right thing, and I don't hold this against her. But she did reveal who had been conning her into sending that message to my husband, and sure enough, she gave up one of the Facebook alts had used to infiltrate the problematic furry group. I confronted him on the information I discovered, and he could not have been more evasive about it, claiming a friend of his had control of the alt account. After waiting half a day for his explanation, I blocked him and removed him from every contact I had listed him on. So yeah, let me explain that again for clarity. My former friend got up in my business even after I asked him to dial it back several times, got bitter about me turning down his advances, and purposely decided to start drama between me and my husband, who has... well, let's just say he has something in common with the title of a David Cronenberg movie from 2005. And do this because one of the people he had given my unauthorized information to was a police officer he was friends with, in an attempt to try and help me. So yeah, there you have it. My former male best friend tried to get me killed because I wouldn't go out with him. That's something, I'm sure. But that's not even close to the end of the story. After that, he started blowing up my phone, after illicitly obtaining my phone number, I might add, and my Google Voice number, which admittedly I did give him. First claiming to be one of his other friends who had gone off the grid during the furry drama, but just happened to make a comeback to convince me to talk to again. Then some woman named Janet, who I had never heard of in the 7 years I had known, just happened to be one of his bosom buddies. And then finally, an entirely new phone number of his own. All of these were either VoIP numbers or spoofed from other locations. I humored the first one for a day or so, the second one for about an hour. Then I just went to blocking and deleting. To his credit, he did offer a half-assed apology after I mentioned that in the first day or so of us corresponding, he didn't once attempt to so much as apologize to me. I get that he's autistic, but you can't blame neurodivergence for everything if you expect to be treated as a high-functioning individual. And after that, he would just periodically harass me on my private number, until finally I made a call-out post about him on the Facebook cosplay group, letting everyone know he was catfishing group members and rallying them into harassing me in my waking life. I actually got some feedback from one group member who had also been contacted by his alt. Not only had he been trying to message my husband for a while, but he had also used this alt to spread rumors about my ex being a con creep. And now that I think of it, he had given me access to a different alt during our furry infiltration and changed the password a few weeks before the incident. He might have been planning this attack for a while. And after I put him on blast in that cosplay group, nothing. He finally left me alone for good. Well, thanks for bearing with me through that. It's still kind of hard to believe that someone I was so close to could do me dirty like that, but it's definitely taught me that I can't trust people anymore. This is part of the reason I'm not working on my graphic novel anymore, at least for the time being. I want to rewrite the story to kind of change up the characters based on people I know or knew, and I have some new ideas about integrating the two storylines to make the whole thing seem less derivative of Mulholland Drive. Or maybe more derivative, I don't know. I might do more of these Storytime type videos if I have something interesting to talk about, but I doubt I'd be able to top this. Unless I talked about that time I helped a girl I had a crush on buy a personal massager in an attempt to get her to like me, but that's just weird. And if you're watching this, bury your ego, bro. If anyone from the cosplay or furry groups even remembers you, which I doubt they do, apologize to them for coming off as an obsessive creep. And don't hide behind an altar or proxy to do so. Man up and do it yourself. And most of all, pay attention when someone gives you explicit information on their boundaries. Don't beat dead horses, don't cross any lines, and if all else fails, mind your own business. And also, I'm sorry I enabled you and failed to protect you. I hope that the next person you become close to keeps a closer eye on you.